So it is day 135, I think, of my attempt to plant a tree every day in 2023. So let's get on with it. So for tonight's planting, I am going to be quite careful in terms of choosing protection. So first off, this is a Litchi chinensis seedling, and these are quite tender and very prone to sunburn. So what we're going to be doing, seeing as we're planting it at a dry time of year when the sun is quite intense, we're going to be planting it right to the southeast of a hedge. This is a hedge of Eugenia uniflora, which is the Suriname cherry, which is evergreen, so it should perpetually provide quite a nice bit of shelter from the afternoon and winter sun. So we will be enjoying that little bit of shelter. This is going in very close. It's actually quite useful sometimes to have a large tree planted right in your hedgerow. The roots will interact to a degree, but generally speaking, if they're not fertilized, plant roots aren't that aggressively competitive. There are a few that are exceptions to that, so something like a fig isn't necessarily something you want planting right up against something else particularly sensitive, and something like a sour plum can be very, very aggressive because that is actually somewhat parasitic with its roots. But the lychee and the Suriname cherry should just be able to twine through each other without causing each other too many problems, and they should get along quite well. And once the lychee is a little bit higher, I will prune it up so it actually goes above the hedge, so it doesn't create too much density down around the hedge, and then we'll have a sort of layered vegetation, so no one will be making each other too stifled and stopping air movement around each other. But for now, it will be enjoying the shelter of the hedge. The hedge does have a drip line on it, which we do actually sometimes turn on. I have actually remembered to do that twice, I think, in the last month, which does mean this area is often a little bit moister than a lot of the rest of the garden, which means it attracts a lot more insects, which means it inevitably attracts a lot of the chickens, and the chickens do a lot of digging here, and they have uprooted quite a few small tender plants I've put here in the past. So to try and stop that happening to our little lychee, we're going with 3 little layers of chicken-proof barriers. So we're starting with a couple of pieces of aloe arborescens. These are still quite small and fragile because these have been growing in very deep shade. This is actually going to be moderate shade here. We do have some deciduous trees directly overhead. There's no direct sunlight at this time of year, only dappled sunlight in the morning and early afternoon. But these deciduous trees will be dropping their leaves, and then we'll have brief direct morning sunlight for part of the dry season before the leaves come back in. And so these will actually be perking up quite a lot, and they'll be getting significantly bigger and significantly more of a barrier to any sneaky little chickens. But they won't be enough to protect this by themselves, especially because currently they don't have roots, so it'll take a while before they really hold on and stabilize this area. So we're also going to be putting in a few pieces of Euphorbia milli. This is the Christ thorn. This is a very prickly and very toxic plant. Pre-rooting ones are much less prone to rotting going into a wet hole like this. So these are actually going to form a nice prickly and toxic barrier protecting this from both chickens, and if we ever get goats, it should dissuade the goats from eating this right down to the base. And finally, just to sort of increase the density of this and create effectively a sort of little leafy spiky fence, we're going to be adding in a whole bunch of pieces of one of the fountain bamboos. Now this I'm cutting just above the node, so the whole part that is going into the ground is stemless node, which means none of the stem cells, which are on those little rings periodically that you see along sections of bamboo, none of those stem cells are actually in the ground, which means that even though I've never managed to root a bamboo from a stem cutting, I'm not going to manage accidentally here where I really don't want one rooting. So that should be everything for tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Apologies for my somewhat clumsiness in the planting. I'm clearly not fully together today. Please tune in again tomorrow. I will be planting something else. I'm not sure when the review for these last couple of weeks will be going up because I've been having some real technical difficulties on that, so it might end up waiting for the next one so I have time to resolve the review and get a few other things out of the way first, but we'll see.